But what I'd love for all of us to do is also, in reflecting upon your speech and the feedback that I gave you, go home and look it over, watch your video with it, and see what was being said, or at least what I was seeing. If there is something that I wrote down and you are in your head, Amanda, I did that. I had that attention getter. I used that central idea. Please let me know. And we can always send me an email. We can go over it, and I can also review it since I still have those videos, and I can review it, make sure that we're on the same page. Also, sometimes we think we are doing it right, but I marked you off for it. So maybe I wasn't clear in that communication, or wasn't clearly communicating exactly how I wanted that structure, or why we would use delivery in that style. So I'm more than welcome to talk to you about that as well. But take the time to go through, to review it, and then come back and talk to me, if you don't mind. Does that sound good to y'all? And then if you do have any questions about what I wrote, let me know, because I know that I scribble quite a lot. So I can always clarify what I was talking about with you. But for the time, let's go ahead and pull out the proposal speech, or the topic proposal speech. In the rhetorical arts classes, students are required usually to write this in paper form, a 3-page paper about your proposal. However, I like the opportunity for us to get up and practice speaking, and I think that you can convey the same idea within the verbal quality as well. There is nothing that you have to turn into me in written form for this, except for your evaluation sheet. That is all that you are required to bring in on Thursday when you speak, is simply your evaluation sheet. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? So you don't have to turn in anything to me. So as you'll see with this listing of information, you have your proposal speech prompt, which should list out exactly what this is about. Then we have the proposal speech structure, which is listed here so that you can follow along and see if you can fill in some ideas yourself. Then you have the proposal speech topic checklist, which is everything that will be required to bring in with you. And then again, the proposal speech evaluation sheet. So on Thursday when you come in, I will have numbers on the board, or if I'm not here yet, simply write some numbers on the board. Sign up in the order that you would like to go, and put your evaluation sheet in numerical order on the desk. And then sit down and get excited, because we get to have speeches again. All right, I think it's exciting. Leo!
Notice it says, please staple together your evaluation sheet with your and then stop.
With your, yeah, that's why, because I was like, oh, I should delete that.
Because I could
delete that. You, with your what? I don't know, with your $1 million you plan on giving me? Write that down. With the present that you bring for me? I don't know, whatever you want. Write down. But you don't have to bring in anything except this thing. With your invisible enthusiasm. All right, let us go through this. So the topic proposal speech, anytime we're proposing that we want to discuss something, you may be going through this within the next 4 years of your career as well. So let me put this in a situation. In the next 4 years, you're more than likely going to be going through the experiences of writing research, of maybe even coming to a close in your future where you will write a thesis, or perchance you'll do a capstone project or something, where you will need to propose your ideas to your instructor, to your chair, or to whoever you've decided you want as your mentor throughout that process. And when we do so, it's important that we highlight some ideas about what we're speaking about, or we can at least synthesize where we believe that our topic is going to go. Getting you used to communicating these ideas, hopefully, will allow you to think about what you, again, write before you start to write it. Because many of us don't even really consider, where do I want to go? What am I going to do with this paper? What is the purpose? What is the outcome? Until we start the writing process. And then it takes us a long time. And then by the end, we're like, oh, yeah, that's what that paper was about. But if we can anticipate that in advance, we can also start to shape, right, with all that pre-search work that we do. If we can talk about our proposal and talk about what we want to, in fact, discuss in our research, it gives us an opportunity to not only have the practice of speaking at an academic level, but also putting our thoughts into words and communicating them to different audiences and different ideas. Ideally, the topic proposal speech is going to let us know in large what we will be looking at for this semester, But in specific, we're going to look or address a particular question for this topic that you believe is going to, a question that is going to generate answers to provide you with where we will go for the informative speech. So if we start at one place, hopefully there we have provided some answers, and those answers can help guide us into what do we want our audience to be informed about on this issue or on this topic. So hopefully all of us have started to understand a bit more this element of social justice as to who you are giving a voice to through the use of this paper. Remember that when there's an issue of social justice, and hopefully all of us have come to this conclusion by now, social justice has to exist because of what? What is there a disparity in, or what's going on when people don't what? Have
equal rights, like resources, opportunities.
Good. So equal rights.
Well, more like
all people are created equal. I mean, everybody has equal rights, but equal. I like where you were
like
going because you said it.
They kind of just like denies them of opportunities and like value, I guess.
Yeah, and you said it before. If you want to say that.
Basic human resources.
Basic human resources, basic human services, which we're all somewhat entitled to. You want to play on that?
No, I was going to say order, but I guess it's not right.
What do you mean about order?
Like, we need social justice because to have order, we don't have social justice. It's like I don't remember exactly what it says, but it's like so depending on your culture and race, that's how people choose what you're like.
Like where your position is?
Your job positions and like your ranking to keep order.
Yeah. I mean, you are definitely on the right track there. Absolutely. So depending on your skin color and your what did you say?
Your race.
Yeah, so depending upon your race, depending upon your culture, depending upon your age, depending on your nationality. Now, the only key here could be the word people. People what? Because you said, depending upon that, people put you in what? You said that, right? People.
I think.
Yeah. Let's build upon that, this idea of people. People, individually, are not responsible for this oppressive order. Systems, like I said before, are the responsible entity. Individually, I can stereotype you. Individually, I can discriminate against you on an individual level. But oppression, that thing that causes the inequity, exists in a systemic level. So oftentimes when we say, like, you know, that people keep order, because that was something that happens, nobody is sitting around being like, okay, you go over here, you go over here. Do we ever see it like that? No. It's built into our laws, to our rules, to our regulations. It gets manifested through different things like our media, well, through our communication. We start to create realities about who is superior, who isn't. And we don't come out and say, this is a superior group, but we do it in pervasive ways. And it continuously maintains and cycles itself over and over again. So good. I mean, this idea of social justice, in essence, that individuals, all people, right? So here we are as human beings, that we don't have equal access to basic human rights. So that we don't have equal access to education. That sure, we're all created equal, but can we all reach the same opportunity level? Do we all have the same ability to make it, to be successful? I mean, if you work hard enough and you try hard enough, you should be able to, right? Have you ever heard that theme before? Mm-hmm. But if you work hard enough, you should be able to accomplish anything. Those people don't have to be in poverty. They should work harder. Those people on the street home. Well, go get a job, and then you won't be homeless.
It's like they don't have an address, so it's like it's sad.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
There's this idea of meritocracy that exists in the United States, and if you don't know this idea of meritocracy, and we can always talk about this, of course.
Meritocracy is a really actually important sociological term, which Alain de Botton was like talked about in the 19th century.
Which who's talked about? Which who?
You know Alain de Botton? No. I can describe it.
Oh, no. I mean, yeah, no, I get meritocracy, but I wanted, yeah, if you want to explain it, go for it.
No, like, you know, it's like...
Oh, no, but I wanted to, I didn't know if there was a different,
what is
who that
important is
person.
just, like, how, like, it's important, like, your talents are important in meritocracy. Like, that's kind of something different than democracy. But, like, what we need to understand is, like, how, like, what meritocracy can offer with democracy. What I really, like, thought about with one of my, like, philosophical essays, like, which I've written. So that's why I just, like, wanted to talk about it.
So, in terms of meritocracy, what are the messages that are sold? This idea.
As I said, like, talent is, like, really important. People, like, what I care or, like, what I kind of believe, like, with meritocracy is, like, people needs to do, like, what if they are talented, and also, like, what they are capable of doing. Like, you know, like, that is, like, where they work is, like, it should be where they like to work.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, like, it should be a place where they can show their talents too. That's what.
Okay. Gotcha. So, in regards to that, how do we even know what our talents are when we aren't given the opportunity to explore them? The which one? Oh, right, yeah.
Capitalism is not all right for that. It's the wrong system. Definitely, I can say the first one.
Yeah. This idea that when we continue to be told that if you try hard enough, if you work hard enough, you'll make it, you'll be able to accomplish something, you're going to move up, you're going to do great things, you'll eventually be given what you deserve. They call it, in the terms of, like, the concept is called the myth of meritocracy, that there's this myth that exists, that we're constantly told, that we believe and we buy into. But they say it's a myth because, in actuality, the system is not set up for everybody to be able to work hard to get that far. And 99% of us, in actuality, will continue to work, but we won't be able to move past those specific points.
So
in regards,
ideas can develop each other. Like what I mean.
Oh yeah, so go ahead.
I've told about that, like, you know, just to think meritocracy with democracy, how they can fit together.
Yes.
Like, yeah, what I thought about. Because, like meritocracy, there should be moral quality or, like, yeah, justice. It's like what like to use more.
Yeah, and that's good. And if I see where you're going with this, then yes. Like an ideal meritocracy would be one that was grounded in justice as well. Because in order for everybody to be able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, to work hard, to put forth the effort, if you do so, you will succeed. We have to change the system. Or the system needs to be, in fact, one that people can put forth their talents and their best abilities and be able to rise up. But alas, just the systemic way that is doesn't allow for us.
Like, you know, we should think about it like more than a system, like, because, like, if we just only think inside the limits of capitalism, yeah, you won't. This is like you cannot ride.
Yeah, and let me even
So
so
sometimes, like, what we should do, like, yes, is like to think more than, like, we don't need to think always about systems or about ideologies. If that makes sense.
I think that when I say system, that our words are different, or that I'm saying something, and let me, like, just say that if I'm talking about the system, that it can be government, it can be
No, I mean capitalism.
religion, it can be capitalism, it can be
Like, yeah, I mean like in a bureaucratic way.
yeah, sure. It can be our education system is a structure.
Yeah.
Your churches, your family.
That's like all with like it combines all what you said. When I say system.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So that we are on that one. So ideally, what I'm hoping is that each of us, and what you will have to do is that at least we've come up with an idea or a question. We know our topic or a broad area of focus. Then we've narrowed it down to maybe asking ourselves some questions, right? And I gave each of you these questions to maybe start asking yourself that can generate and start to discover where this topic or what is one area of this broad topic that you would like to focus on. What is the inequity that is existing? Where is the problem? And what do you want to focus on? So in the grand scheme of things, every issue of social justice may have several different reasons or several different levels to them as to why the issue exists or what's going on or what's happening. So hopefully each of you have started to come to those conclusions and you've started to narrow down your focus a bit more so that you can identify specifically what area you would like to focus on. Because we only have such a small amount of time to speak and a small amount of time to produce our work, our job simply is to get our foot in the conversation, to start a dialogue about what's been discovered and to see where it exists, and to simply start to understand that the problem doesn't come with being like, well, that's not right. We should treat people equally. Yes, we should treat people equally. But why aren't we? How are we not doing it? How is it subversive? How has it been internalized into the fabric of our society or our small cultures that we're looking at over time? Since the topic approval, which we've in essence done already, revolved around the findings from the pre-search assignment, we are going to use that pre-search assignment that you did before and develop this 2 to 3 minute speech. Now, mind you, I know that this is a lot of information to get through in 2 to 3 minutes, so I'd like to give you some wiggle room in the format as well, but we'll hold on to that one. You're going to be required to use an attention getter, present a clear central idea throughout, develop your main points, use full transitions to get you from one point to another, and use a conclusion as it says here. Hopefully you all know that format and we've gone through it, and that is in essence, the same structure that we'll be using. I'm not going to use this bottom part because I'd rather just go into what we're talking about because I basically wrote it out. But let us flip over to the topic proposal speech format. At this point, is there anybody who hasn't come to a question that identifies or that the answers will yield insight into the area of how your topic is within the realm of social justice? Have you all discovered? So, for example, if I said something like, and I'll only use this one because people aren't using it. It's like equal pay for women, right? So if that's my topic, why are women? And then maybe I asked a question like, why are women not being paid equally? That's going to give me about 6 or 7 different answers. And it's going to be like early childhood education, gender roles, stereotyping, STEM and math, sexualization. There's all of these blatant just not paying equally. So there's all those different ones. To go over all of those topics would be a lot. And it would yield way too many answers. But if I wanted to simply narrow down that focus, how does early STEM education affect future inequity of women's pay? Now, I know that question specifically is designed, and it's going to be addressing that one part, and we can start to explore that area.
While I'm revealing the 3 main points, if I could kind of reiterate them in a different way. when you ask key issues, that's equivalent to the what in the question, what is going on, and when you're asking us to show our research, it's what are we looking into and what are we going to end up explaining in a couple months. And with the how does this fit, it's the who is being affected and how does that relate. Is that kind of on a grasp on the line of what you want from those three?
Depends upon your question specifically, right?
Okay.
Especially with those key issues. I'm not quite sure. Everybody's will be a bit different. The main points are going to be the same for all of you, but what you end up talking about within that will be different depending upon your question. So yes, and in regards to the research, yes, research that will assist in the development, like it says there, of this work. What am I going to look at? What would I like to put forth? And then simply explaining to me in your own words how this makes sense to social justice, yes. Like, why is this a social justice issue? What's the inequity? How is this preventing them from having access to basic human needs? Yeah.
Is the point of it kind of to like sell and not go into too many specifics so that people want more research?
Oh, yes, this is really for me in this essence. Like I said, the purpose of a proposal is for you to be able to articulate what your purpose in your research is, what you plan on looking at, and what you plan on doing. In essence, many people will either write a proposal at work, and it's like, okay, well, here's what I'm proposing we do for this project, and here's like the layout, here's how I anticipate it will cost, these are all the people that I'll need, this is the research that I think that we need to do some focus groups, and I'll look at it in that way. Or, perchance, we do a proposal to, again, a fellow teacher, or perchance a mentor, or whoever's leading a thesis or a project that we propose what we intend to do. This is so that I know that you're on the right track, and I simply want you to be able to dialogue about your research and where you want to go.
So we don't give too many answers, but we'll ask more questions.
You don't.
It's like why women aren't being paid equally, and then your main point is only if you're answering my question, but we're asking more.
You may in fact want to say, so if I was saying like how does, for example, so like why aren't women paid equally, that would probably be not narrowed enough at this point to bring it up here. But if I said, like, for the example that I gave of how does STEM education hinder women's pay equity in the future? Does that make sense? So now I'm simply talking about STEM. So maybe I want to, like, some key issues would be like that the education department is doing something, or maybe I could bring up an area of how teachers have unconscious bias about the roles for men and women within a classroom and what they should or shouldn't be doing, or perchance how questions are structured or how attention is given. Maybe those are the issues that I can bring up. And it will be in brief. Your informative speech will allow you to do more, but it's not for the purpose of getting us excited. It's simply for the purpose of just touching on a couple things. But I should be excited. I can't. Like this. Okay, go.
I think you actually kind of hit on what my question was, but I just want to
Sure.
clear it up. So you started with the idea of, like, your topic is equal pay for women. That's, like, the big overhead thing. And then you narrowed it down to, you turned that into a question, like, why are women paid less? And then you narrowed that into, you had a variety of answers and you picked one. So you're focusing on that one answer. Do you turn that into a question or a statement? You say, after your variety of answers, you focus on early STEM education. So would you say, women are being paid less because of improper early STEM education, or how would you turn that answer into? Should you phrase it as a statement?
You can still state it as a question.
Okay.
So it could be something for. Let me even. I can do something here for you, but also let me go through. So many people logged in. INST. I always forget what was it. Classroom.
Can I ask one question about
You can ask.
organization?
Yeah.
Would we be able to change the order in which the
Sure.
three main points are presented?
Just make sure you list that out at the top. Like when you say your thesis statement, simply say it in the same order that you intend to.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
I'll just use my idea for my situation as an example. For my topic, I think it would be more appropriate for me to explain social justice before I explain related research.
Great.
So for my speech, I would want to switch that, but for any and all cases, we are allowed to do that then?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Move these around to make it. And some people may say, may want to start with the research, right? Maybe the
Yeah.
research is what got them excited, what got them interested, and what drew them to this idea. So maybe the research would make sense to start it out in that way. Let's go through the process, and then I have a couple samples from former students that may help you. And when I'm saying something, well, wait for me. I may be able to do it online. But yes, those students will help you as well. So I'll go through the structure, and I'll go through the format. I'll give you examples like I did with the introduction speech, and then we can watch one as well, just to get you going and to help you feel at least a little bit better. But like all speeches, everybody, we are not going to start out with giving a topic. We will instead start out with an
Attention getter.
Yay! Absolutely. So we'll start out with an attention getter. So in your introduction, you are again going to have 3 different points. And the first thing will be to have an attention getter. And now what should the attention getter always relate to? The topic! Absolutely, that central idea. What is the purpose? So in this case, make sure that your attention getter is in specific relation to your topic. Something to get us excited, something to get us interested. So what are the different types of attention-getting devices? We know these, hopefully a little bit better by now. But things like a quote, fantastic.
Story.
A story.
Fact.
A fact or statistic. Awesome statistic.
A joke if it's actually funny.
Right, yeah, a joke if it's funny.
A question if it's relatable.
A question if it's relatable, absolutely. Or you intend and only ask a question and get answers if what? Yeah, only ask for participation
Emotion.
if you're going to acknowledge them and if you want to utilize that information later on, or if you're going to come back to it or relate to it or connect your audience with that in some way. Good. These are some awesome ways to start your own speech. I didn't teach this class in the spring, but when I taught this class in the fall, I had a student who did their topic revolving around sexual assault on campuses. And what this individual did is they started off giving a piece of testimony from the victim in that Brock Turner Stanford case. And so what she did is she read, and she had practiced it enough that she didn't have to necessarily read it. She made it incredibly poignant in the way that she delivered it. I felt it talked about like what she felt in her hair, what she felt in her body, what she felt on her skin. And to start a story like that already draws you in. That was one specific example of an individual who had experienced that type of inequity. And so with that, although this being one story, it was one that made the news. These stories happen all the time on every campus. And so that's how she brought this topic in about the need to make changes to Title IX in order to create that kind of equity. Does that make sense to y'all? So we can also use any type of interesting fact or statistic. If you wanted to talk about how poignant or relevant your issue is, if you want to talk about the number of individuals who are suffering because of this, how many people died last year, how many individuals are within a system of maybe financial distress, physical harm, you can always lay out those statistics. When we talk about statistics, they're sometimes grander than we would. And I'll talk about this when we get to supporting materials, but when we talk about statistics in grand terms, something like 1 in, and the numbers have changed, 1 in 5 college women will be sexually assaulted sometime during their life. So we just say 1 and 5. But then what we could do is we can even narrow your focus, and you can look around your classroom, right? That means like maybe 2 of us in this classroom will be. So then when we can start to make those statistics smaller on a level, right? That means that many at LMU, and that means in this classroom, 2 of us, right? So we can look at it in different ways. And you can start to make those numbers appeal specifically to your audience if you wanted to break those down. But telling another individual story, if you've gone through the research and you've started to see some of the testimony that maybe individuals have experienced, that's a great way. Is there a quote that relates to maybe the issue of what the oppression is, or perchance what the world would look like if that oppression was alleviated? Maybe we want to do something in that way. Again, a joke if it's funny. It's rough to find a joke in social justice sometimes, but I support all creative routes. And sometimes not the word parody, what's the word I'm looking for? Those to write, not sarcasm and not parody. Satire. Oftentimes satire will work in order to illuminate or to bring about ideas, i.e. Saturday Night Live will do things like this, they'll write satirical, or South Park, those types of comedy shows that will bring up the issues and show you just how ridiculous you are for believing in whatever the problem is, right? And show you kind of the error of your ways, a different Aristotelian way. And again, yes, asking questions will absolutely also work. So looking through and starting to generate some ideas about your attention would be great, but I'm also going to put a little circle around that, and we'll come back to it. The second thing that you do then is you are going to reveal your topic. And in this case, you really are going to reveal the general topic. What has landed you here, right? Like, how have we gotten to this, and how have we arrived at this specific issue? So what is the topic that you're going to be looking at? Not the question, but this is where you can tell us the topic in general. But what else is the purpose of the reveal topic portion?
To reveal your topic.
Yes. What else is the purpose of the reveal topic portion? Back. Yeah, thank you, Jana. Good job. Not back it up, but background information. Any kind of background information that your audience may need to know before they get to the body of the speech. Is there any type of like historical facts that we may need to know about that we're not going to get into in depth? Would you want to talk about, or maybe this is the area where you start to contextualize exactly where this is taking place and why it's important to look at this specific area, or why it's important to look at this specific environment. So maybe you would want to bring that up. But the other thing that you may also want to do here, and this is why I said look back at that pre-search assignment and keep those ideas open, specifically with a B on your pre-search assignment, which asks, like, what got you interested in this? Many of you may have a personal connection to these topics. And you can, in fact, during the reveal topic portion, if you wanted, communicate your personal connection and how that has engaged you and how that got you started on this journey. And after you've done, some research, you've arrived at said question. But is there maybe a story that you can connect to, or somebody that you know that has experienced something? Knowing that, remember that you can always also take that personal experience and use it as your attention getter as well. So you could tell your own personal testimony or your own personal story and situate that so it got our interest going if you wanted. Does that make sense to y'all? So feel free to explore and put that in either as your attention getter or as your reveal topic. But is there anything else that we should know within the reveal topic? Is there any specific language that we should be aware of? Are there terms that and this is what we talked about in the library, right? With our library, I need to bring a thank you card. Try to remind me of that so we can write a thing. I'll sign up. No pressure, I'll try to remind myself. In the library, we talked that oftentimes terminology within specific disciplines or within specific law can often be used differently. So making sure that we're all on the same page when we hear specific terms, if any of those need to be explained, this would be a great place to do it as well. Once you get through this reveal topic portion of your presentation, we'll then go into creating our thesis statement. And your thesis statement is obviously going to be a combination of your central idea and your main points like we did before. In order for you to get to know me better, right, I'll tell you about blank, blank, and blank. Because this is a 2 to 3 minute speech, the same idea is going to apply when it comes to timing and when it comes to balance. Keep in mind that your introduction and your conclusion shouldn't be much longer than 30 seconds of time, which is a very small amount to get through these different issues. And then take your time to consider how you want to break down and how you want to discuss the specific main points that you are going to be talking about. But if we go back now to the first page, and you look here at the bottom, it's the last paragraph. It says, a good attention getter will spark the audience's interest. A good central idea states what you will cover. This semester I plan to explore the topic of sex trafficking and specifically how the trafficking of young women and children contribute to sex tourism in the United States. So in that case, did you see how I did that, Dory? So I laid out not only the topic, but I said specifically what the question was. And then your main points go into that. I will be describing some main issues. I'll also talk about some research that I plan to examine. And finally, I'll tell you a little bit about how this topic exists within the realm of social justice. But like Daniel so eloquently put, you can mix around those main points in order that makes you feel like you are explaining your question or your topic, your issue best. So if you want to start out with the key issues, or if you'd rather start out with social justice or research, that is up to you. Simply make sure you state it in that order in your thesis statement. Does that make sense to y'all? Kind of? Sort of? Do you all think that you can do this? Yes? Okay, good. I don't know if these faces are saying, yeah, man, I totally get it, or if you're like, I'm so confused right now, and I'm going to go home and just talk about this confusion with my friends. No? Okay. Because I'm right here. We can talk about it. Let me see if I can pull up. While we continue to talk. So each of you, do you feel good? Do I need to write out how this thesis will go? Or do you feel good about understanding that you'll just take whichever question you believe is going to yield, or at least your more narrowed focus? I decided to look at the issue of women, what did I say? Sex trafficking in general. But specifically, I want to start my exploration by focusing on how, right? And then you can tell us the question. And in order to do so, I'd first like to tell you a little bit about the key issues that are going on, tell you about the research, and then finally how this exists in the realm of social justice. Sound good? Okay. Then let's continue on, shall we? So then we'll go into our transitions. And remember that before each of your main points, you should always have a transition. And this transition should include 3 different things. What are they? Graham, give me the first thing.
Flag.
A flag. I love it. A flag. Maybe a sign. Yes, but a flag. Something that lets us, I totally got it when you said flag. Does everybody get it when we say flags? Right? Something that indicates that we are, this is the first idea. Oh, that we are beginning. Oh, we're starting. Interesting. Yes, here we go. The next one. Oh, next, right? And we use those words to let our audience know we're switching ideas. This is not an extension of what was before. We also can talk about the main point, or we should talk about the main point we're going into. Caroline, do I have to do the review preview each time?
No.
No, what could I do?
You can just go right into it.
Go right into that main point. Absolutely. So I can do a couple different things. I can remind you what I just spoke about if we're going into our second main point. I told you a little bit about the key issues. Next, I'm going to debrief a bit of how I intend on exploring and researching this topic. Does that make sense? Okay, great. And then what's the last thing that we usually have in there? A central what? Idea. For this, I'm going to give you the option of starting to drop the central idea. when you get to the informative and the persuasive speech, you will no longer have the central idea, because it would be weird to say, like, so that you can be persuaded to whatever, right? We'll reinforce that within the information itself. So you're more than welcome to start to drop that if it doesn't really flow for you. Or you could say, so next let's talk about some key points that are going to be addressed when looking at the question, how does sex trafficking contribute to whatever that question was that I gave. Does that make sense? So feel free to include it, feel free to drop it, either or, it'll be fine. But what I do want to hear are those signposts and the main point that you will be going into so that we know that you're moving along. Any questions about those transitions? All right, let's talk about the development. Let's talk about the bulk of it all, that body of the speech, right? So let's talk about the body in regards to these key issues of topic. So what are the key issues that we want to begin to look at? What are some things that you, and like we were talking about before, at the bottom of, so sorry, at the bottom of your, how am I thinking of? Your pre-search worksheet, there was all those questions, the who, the why, the where, the how, the when. Are those issues specific now that you can start to examine those a little bit more in depth? Did you start to find out why this exists? Is there a reason how it exists or what's manifested that has made this happen? Do you want to discuss some of the key players who are involved in this or how it perchance all got started in the first place, if there's a place to identify it? Because some individuals have a starting point. We know that when this started, this is what happened. Or with maybe some of the issues that you would want to talk about as background, even. If you're not going to get around to that in your informative speech, but you've started. So many of us talked a bit in our, or some of us talked a bit about like the idea of equal education, right? So what does prevent equal education from happening? I know that specifically we want to talk about, whoever our marginalized culture is, or whoever that non-dominant culture is. So why do specific individuals have access to education over others? And perchance, in order for us to identify or explain that, some of the key issues may be to go back in history and take a look at what happened. And then today, how is that same inequity maintained? Maybe that's an issue that you would want to talk about. Or what law has recently been brought into play that has contributed to this problem or that's continuing to perpetuate this cycle of oppression? So take a look at some of those key issues. Also, the other thing that you would want to look at are these key issues, in fact, in your question. Like when you were talking about the question, are the key issues directly related to that question? Because people will oftentimes want to talk about something that's not even related to the question, but remember, that's going to help us with this narrowed focus, that we can narrow in on what we specifically want to talk about. So ask yourself that. Are these key issues answering my question? Are they explaining? Are they building upon that question specifically? Ask yourself that as you go through and as you go forward. But are there a couple different areas that you simply want to focus on? Now, if you have more key issues that you feel you want to explore and expand upon, what my gift here, or what I was saying if you wanted to streamline some of these main points, is that you can very much cut. I am fine with you cutting the research part of this presentation. Not only have I noticed that when we are writing, I think that at this point as to where we are in the class, I am more than happy with you talking about some of the areas of research that you've done, or what articles did you want to look at, or is there a specific website or an organization that is working towards equity that you find is going to be helpful for you? Absolutely, you can totally address those, and that's what that research topic, that research area is. In your pre-search or your exploration worksheets, I asked you to write down some areas of research that you wanted to go back and explore. Or were there any particular articles or individuals of whom contributed to the conversation, or again, the alleviating of the issue, that you maybe want to get some insight on? Are there any counter arguments? So saying, like, for example, we talked a bit. Oh, so in regards to the topic, for example, if we were talking about this about abortion, right? So like talking about the opposition. So like would it behoove you to fuel your argument, to look at an opposing viewpoint, to look at an opposition side, to maybe look why people are contributing to this or why they are against the other idea. And maybe that would be one of the parts of research that you would want. But simply explaining about that research, what is it? Don't just list me the journal article. But specifically, what was it about that you believe will fuel your next steps? So like if we're saying, looking and addressing the counter-argument, that will help to provide you with information that will hopefully do what? That will reveal some more injustice, that will reveal how individuals are becoming more oppressed, that will reveal reveal the flaw in the logic of keeping that ideology or that law going, right? So whatever way you wanted to talk about the research, you are more than welcome, and it can take a lot of exploration. Like our librarian said, yes, we want you to start looking at journal articles and understanding what they are, but for this basic informative speech, we're not going to be looking at research like that typically. You can, but don't feel like that's the only place that research exists. We spoke before that it's books and magazines, right? That there can be internet sites that are credible and reliable, that there are different types of things that we can do, like interviews. You can watch documentaries. You can look at research textbooks, right? You can talk to other people in the community. You can find specific testimonies. So there is a bazillion different ways that research can exist that doesn't have to be with reading scientific journals. Does that make sense? Okay, good deal. If you decide to not utilize that particular main point, all you're going to do is expand upon your key ideas as well as your social justice, making sure that those balance and keeping those to be your two main points. Yes?
So that means if you did it that way, you'd only have 2 body points, but you'd have more expanded than more, like maybe a minute for each one. And then my other question was, say you did do a fact or a stat for your intro, do you have to cite your fact?
Is it a common fact? The sky is blue. Washington's birthday is in January. No. Then yes.
Where would you cite it?
You would say it before. Okay, great question. So in speaking, and we'll talk a lot about this, about how to speak your citations.
According to.
Yeah, that's all you have to do. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, according to an article written by Blue Blee in the LMU Lion newspaper. What? Prowl? Roar? What's your...
The Loyola.
Loyola. I don't know why I couldn't think of that for a second. Right? So you'll give that type of credibility. And we'll talk in more length about the criteria that you must state out loud in your speeches when we get to informative. But at least for now, before you go into it, if you are doing a direct quote, make sure that you will use the words quote, and then you let us know when that ends. End quote. Sound good? But if it's a paraphrase, you can set it up in that way as well. Or you can say something like, according to Joe Schmo, in his article, Blee, 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 it is suggested that, or it is reiterated that, or he asserts the idea, or he asserts the concept that, right? So you can either directly quote it or not. Does that make sense to you?
I have a question.
Yeah?
Going back to the thesis statement.
Sure.
So it's not just, so it's the central idea and like the main point, but it's like a very broad, like idea of your question, and then you reveal your question.
Yeah, you would just say, this semester I want to focus on the topic of,
Mine's domestic violence.
Of domestic violence. Specifically addressing, or specifically looking at how or why.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you'll say, this semester I have chosen to focus on the area of domestic violence, specifically.
But it's not like you just say the question. You want it to be kind of...
You can say the question, specific. You can say it exactly like that is. Or you can,
okay.
I mean, that's how I mixed it in, so that you could see. You wouldn't say, by specifically asking the question of, why does, you can say it like that if you want. Or you can say, I'm going to look at domestic violence, specifically in regards to that topic, how, and then you can mix it in that way.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you'll narrow it down specifically. Does that make sense to you? Mm-hmm. Okay. So you feel good about your key issues? You feel good about the research, should you bring it up? Then let's go down to this issue of social justice. What is the problem? So for example, we talked about, do you mind? I mean, you're going to do it. So your topic in broad is
more, my topic is how does
just the topic.
a topic is more
Media's
influence on
women
women
body.
body.
Okay, great. Yes. Okay. So media's influence on women's body image, specifically how, and then you're going to narrow it down, right, to whatever it is. What was my purpose of telling you the story? I totally got distracted when we were trying to figure out your topic. Oh, so the issue, like, what's the issue, right? Like, why is this an issue of social justice? Because people will be like, well, an eating disorder, like, what's the common idea about eating disorder? Eating disorder, about social justice?
How
Like, that's their own stuff. Like, that's their own thing. Like, that's not an issue of social justice. How does that even exist? People, they should just eat. Then they're just self-centered.
Because the root of that would lead to a previous, or would lead to a bigger idea of society that you could probably talk about, but not something as small and personal as that. Because that's personally when it happens to you, it's not affecting everyone, but the overall idea of it happening to you and everyone else is part of a statistical thing happening within society. It could be depression or a change in.
Oh yes, I'm so sorry. I was also just playing devil's advocate.
Oh,
That's all I'm asking. No,
Okay.
and I was telling Leo, and this is part of what I do. I used to speak at college campuses about this all the time. I was an inpatient for eating disorders at 19 years old, so I'm very comfortable with talking about this and formalized, and I know all the research, and this was what I studied in graduate school. So no, it's not their own shit. But what is it? Our system exists on.
the industry preying on.
Yeah, that's-
So yes, so there's a bajillion different reasons. So, and you could even ask the question, people may be thinking, how is this an issue of social justice? Well, let me take you on the steps as to how this leads to, because so you get this is a issue of body image. So what's the problem? Maybe individuals get an eating disorder, but that's not an inequity. What comes out of an eating disorder is the inequity. So like you said, Cheyenne, depression, right? Are people able to function when they're depressed and they're constantly thinking about what
That's
they
why
look
it's
like?
a psychological disorder, is because it directly inhibits your ability to function as a person within society.
Exactly. So those individuals will automatically be in equitable position. They're unable to go to school, they're unable to do all these things within that realm. And we have the ability to change something like that. So however you want to address it, so you can ask a rhetorical question back to the audience. You may be thinking well, then how is this? Or you and I talked about, William, when it was is anybody really against this? Well, that's a great way to bring that up. We are constantly contributing to the oppression every single day, right? We're constantly contributing to that problem. Every single time you pick up a magazine, you're buying into the advertisements and you're perpetuating those, right? So, but the individual, who's the targeted individual? And so that's what I really want you to look at in regards to this issue of social justice. And this is a good thing to go back to in those worksheets when it talked a bit about what kind of structures are involved. Is it economic? Is it social, right? So you could even explore some of those questions that were asked. But specifically, who is this targeting? Let's all stand up! Everybody up! Everybody up! And I know that this isn't that exciting, but when 4 people are falling asleep, I feel like it's got to be me. So let's shake our hands. Shake them, and shake them, and shake. You shake! Shake, shake, and shaking, and walking around in a circle. You walk around in your circles. Keep it walking around and you shake it. And now we'll sit it back down. Woo! Woo! Yo! Okay, everybody here. Don't worry. We're almost to the end. Do you know what area of social justice you would want to talk about? So go back to your worksheets. Look at the issues. What is the structure? What is the system? How does this exist? But ideally, who are you targeting? Who is your group? So if you're talking about women, that's a perfect example of it. But what is the inequity that they face when you are sitting around worrying about your body all the time? What is the inequity that these individuals face when they do not get an equal education? So what's the problem that emerges out of this? How is that an issue of not being able to have access to a specific basic human rights? Does that make sense to y'all? So making sure that you can make that connection and take us on the steps as to how this exists as a social justice issue. That's what I'm looking for in that conclusion. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yay! Thank you, Caroline. Good feedback, good feedback. All right, then we'll draw to a close.
I have a question.
Oh, yes, Cheyenne.
Within like the main points, so you can start it off kind of small and talk about, like if you were talking about a specific point of domestic violence, like I'm going to, you could define domestic, not define it, but kind of give a more broad.
You may want to do that in your introduction. If we don't know what domestic violence is, that's a great thing to talk about. If you're going to discuss eating disorders only, you may want to discuss that a little bit. If you're going to talk about attachment, you may want to talk about that up in your introduction and not have to do it here. But if many of us don't even know maybe what this idea of, if you're thinking about still using one child, right? The one child policy of China. Anybody know what that is? Maybe we need some description and defining of that and contextualize that to us. So in the introduction, you may want to.
Because like sometimes you like know, but some people don't understand like what it entails. Because like in the whole like thing with Taylor Swift, like when she went to court like recently, like people were like, "Oh, how is that sexual assault?" But it was like an unwanted like touch on the butt from a man. Absolutely. So it's like there's a lot of different layers to each.
Yeah, I mean, somebody wrote like about like catcalling in their paper or in their social justice worksheet about a friend getting catcalled on campus. You know you're not allowed to catcall people, right? You know that's a violation of Title IX. You know you can get in serious trouble for catcalling. What? Catcalling? Yeah, we talked about it last time. It's okay. We'll get back into this idea of catcalling. But this idea of unwanted verbal. Yeah, so anything that's like unwanted touching, unwanted physical, but like people don't know that that's not a rule, or that's a rule. You can't do that. Like you can't call somebody by a derogatory term, like on a sports team. If your coach ever is like, "Come on, you," uses the P words. You can't say that. You can't like target anybody's gender. Like that's also like all those things are. So, but people don't know that that's like they just assume it's just is. That's what it is.
How do you prove catcalling?
Wait.
How do you like enforce it? How do you prove it on the campus?
I don't know how you prove anything these days with all the odds against us. But hopefully that you had people around you who had also heard it. Catcalling usually won't happen with just two people in a thing, in a situation. Go ahead.
How do you differentiate a catcall and a normal compliment?
Because you know when one is, because you know.
One's more sexually aggressive, I'd say. If I say I like your purse, I think that's catcalling.
Oh, absolutely. Or, oh my goodness, like you look so nice today. Or this is such a nice dress. Yeah, like there's a very easy way to describe it. I don't want you to feel like, oh gosh, I can't say anything. No, you totally can. But
there's a line.
There's a line. There's a line. Yeah. We could totally talk about this, like at great length. I love it. But in the meantime, did you have another idea?
I'm still a little bit like confused on the main point part of it.
Yeah. Okay.
Just like what you would present, I guess.
What's your question?
How does domestic violence perpetuate inequity for Black women in society?
Yeah. Did you come up with any ideas?
Not quite yet. I like just kind of.
Yeah. So once you can start doing that, Cheyenne, you'll come up with a couple ideas,
okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So like, are the key issues answering my question?
Oh,
Does that make sense?
Oh,
So if you're
okay.
looking for these, like if you're asking that question, how do they? I would really also consider narrowing that. Like, are there more than one or two or three reasons that go hand in hand? And a lot of time in your case, there's two issues that go hand in hand, and that's an issue of economics and also an issue of that economics in turn influences individuals who are already at a place of disadvantage, so individuals of color. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like one or two may be in that way. You may, in fact, want to discuss or say, like, I've come in the research to discover that education plays a huge part in this. It is suggested, and you can give some like statistics if you wanted to, that like individuals who are educated, and that is how it was seen, and these individuals are more harmed than other, and you can give us some statistics on that about kind of where it goes. Is there a specific area that you wanted to focus on or target, like in regards to a city or a state, and maybe like because so like for anything like environmentally related, we were talking about how the location oftentimes can influence the inequity or why people are existing in that inequity. So perchance you could talk about that space is one of the key issues, that because they live in North Dakota and in this specific small town and in this poor rural community, individuals are going in and deciding that they can uplift the environment more and more because of blah, blah, blah. Right, so we can kind of expand upon that. So it's kind of like looking at those who, what, when, wheres, and seeing, making sure that those answer or giving us some insight to your question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, does that help a little?
Yeah.
Okay, once you get into those, I think that it'll be like, oh, these two issues I want to talk about in regards to it. These are key ones.
Yeah, and it can.
And
be
if
too,
those
isn't
end
it?
up like being utilized again for your informative speech, then maybe they do, but they'll be different. They'll be expanded upon and much larger.
And that you
And that's
also
okay.
have to like cite within. You have to cite according to. Like if you got the information.
If you did find a statistic from somewhere, from one of the places that you're doing, if it's a website, you don't have to cite the entire HTTP. You can simply be like, according to the LMU website, according to domesticviolence.org, according to the Center for Disease Control, I don't know.
And that can be just if you're answering the question, like, just, like, not specifically, but you're still answering, like, giving your main point. Like, you still have to do that. Like, talk about the website.
Oh, only if you're, like, citing something that's
So if
happening.
it's, like, an idea, it's, like, you don't have to do that.
If it's an idea.
It's something that you got kind of from.
Oh, you mean, like, okay, so... because you're not because you're not asserting that this is a truth, it already is. If it's a fact that's already been proven, and it's coming from that place, then common knowledge never has to be cited.
Yeah.
You can cite it specifically if you're taking it word for word. You can. That would be when you put it in quotations. But if you wanted to always be safe, you could say something like, according to the Boston Red Sox website, or something. Does that make sense? You can always save yourself by citing something, but general information doesn't always have to be cited.
Okay.
So for our conclusion, what do y'all do? I don't know, draw to a close, that's for sure. Let us know that you're ending, and then restate your thesis. Yeah! And then draw back to that. That's right. So if you're talking about that this is an issue of inequity, right? And hopefully, like we talked about, that there is a problem that exists, but this problem also has the ability to be, and all of you have these now because we've looked at most of them, but they have the ability to be remedied or at least alleviated or at least assisted in that type of oppression that exists. It's why we're not taking on like I'm going to talk about ending racism. You're like, okay, that's a big topic to take on, and we don't know if we're going to be able to ever like accomplish that. Like that happens so individualized and so systemically. Can we alleviate the maybe though parts of laws, policies, ideals that have led to racist or race oppression. Yes. So maybe for your relation back to your clothes, you could talk about the alleviation or how it would look if potentially something was helped out. How would that story have been different if there was more education about, or if there was less, less sexualizing in the media? Right? What would that all look like? Does that make sense to you? Yeah.
I just want to ask about the communication apprehension worksheet. Is there like a file online we have to read before we do this, or is this just kind of...
I'm handing it out because we were supposed to do it last Thursday, and what I wanted to do is that I'm going to try to go over one tip for you each class, is what I was going to do. So hang on to that apprehension worksheet. We'll continue to work over it. But in the meantime, okay, I'll show how. You want me to show you an example? Do you want me? You want to ask? Are you sure? I'm right here. Unless does anybody want to come and chat after class? Even?
I'm happy to bounce a couple ideas off immediately after class.
Right. Let me see. What was this? So, okay, yes, we can even. If you listen to like the intro here, and it may be a little bit quiet because of my computer, but let me go ahead and simply put this down. Listen intently. Maybe even just listen. You may need to listen to this on your own.
Maybe, send us the link to it.
Yeah, I can totally send you the link. So she's starting out talking about a female soldier is more likely to get sexually assaulted while in combat than be killed. Right?
It's a pretty good way to start off.
There you go. And
Wow.
so what she what. This is the one next to me. Yes. So this idea of less than, of being objects. So what she really focused on was specifically like within the military, how it's communicated about women. But that comes well before the military ever happens, right? But hypermasculinity within the military and that perpetuation of hypermasculinity is what she started to realize is the contributing factors to the sexual assault, which is really the reasons in most society. That's a whole, again, other Oprah. So you can take a look at that one. The only thing about this one that I think I remember is that she's saying that she was talking about it. Well, you'll see it and notice if there was anything that was like that turned you off, maybe like within the first part. But I can totally send you an email. I can also send you a simple link to these videos because this folder is still up there. So I can send you a link to those videos if you would like to, and you can look through a couple. But otherwise, over the course of the next couple days, or of course of today and tomorrow, take some time and what are you doing?
Give me a picture of me so I can just search it.
Oh, okay, I'll send it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I just said. It's like nobody's listening to me.
Sometimes I was. No.
I'm kidding, Leo. Don't worry. I'll send it to you. I got you. Will you push stop on that because I'm scared that it's going to run out of battery.